Hello, and welcome to Team 11's presentation of Impax Laboratories Rytary. This is Team 11, and my name is Justin, and together with Joe, Amalia, and Kim, we will give you an in-depth look at Rytary, the extended-release carbidopa-levodopa capsule that aids in the fight against Parkinson's disease. We will give you a better understanding of who Impax Laboratories are, their development of Rytary, some of the intellectual property and regulatory processes involved that led to FDA approval, pricing and reimbursement mechanisms used to bring Rytary to market, and the marketing schemes Impax utilized to reach as many people affected with Parkinson's disease as possible. Rytary was developed by BioPharmaceuticals, at the time a division of Impax Laboratories Incorporated. To give a brief background, Impax Laboratories was initially founded in 1995 as a private venture called Impax Pharmaceuticals. In 1999, Impax and Global Pharmaceutical Corporation completed a reverse merger to create what is now Impax Laboratories Incorporated. Impax and Amneal Pharmaceuticals LLC agreed to a merger which would create the fifth largest generic drug manufacturer in the United States. As recent as April 27th of this year, the FTC approved the merger with the stipulation that Impax dissolves their rights and assets of 10 products to 3 different companies in order for the U.S. market to remain competitive in the future. The new venture will be called Amneal Pharmaceuticals Incorporated after the merger is completed. As seen through Impax's history, we can see a steady increase over the years to its generic drug portfolio, which sits at over 60 products. In 2016, Impax purchased the rights to over 20 generic pharmaceuticals from Teva for $586 million. Of those, 15 are already on the market. Being mostly a generic pharmaceutical company comes with many weaknesses and threats. The biggest is competition. You are essentially competing with the likes of Teva, Novartis, and Pfizer, as well as risking that new and more efficient pharmaceuticals will come to market and have exclusivity. Even with these potential threats, Impax has created opportunities through its acquisitions, mergers, and specialty branded drugs like Rytary. This opens the door for future R&D and more brand name drug recognition in the future. They develop generic and specialty drugs as alternatives for some of the most difficult and highly priced brand name products such as Janssen Pharmaceuticals' ADHD drug Concerta. Although levodopa was first used in the 1960s, it was found to have a major drawback for long-time use, causing uncontrolled motor fluctuations and dyskinesia. It wasn't until the early 1970s when they combined levodopa and carbidopa, which drastically reduced side effects and managed symptoms more efficiently. Carbidopa essentially delays the breakdown of levodopa before it reaches the brain, so more levodopa can be converted to dopamine. A shortage of dopamine is the leading cause of Parkinson's. Rytary, which started out as IPX066, was developed by Impax Pharmaceuticals' Specialty Pharma Division to improve the unmet needs of Parkinson's disease drug delivery. At the time, immediate-release carbidopa-levodopa combination drugs were the standard, requiring patients to take the drugs more frequently. This causes spikes in blood serum levels and increases side effects such as dyskinesia, or what some see as tremors or uncontrolled movements in patients with Parkinson's. Rytary was designed specifically to decrease these effects by limiting the amount of off time, or time when side effects are present, that each patient has. This is done through a combination of immediate release and extended release beads of carbidopa-levodopa in a capsule at a 1:4 ratio, giving each patient more on time between doses. Rytary was FDA approved on January 7, 2015 for early, middle, and late stage treatment of Parkinson's disease, post-encephalitic Parkinsonism, and Parkinsonism that may follow carbon monoxide or manganese intoxication. And now for a look at the intellectual property and regulatory processes, I'll pass you on to Joe.
Thank you, Justin. My name is Joe Herman, and I will next discuss the intellectual property status related to Rytary. Rytary comes in 4 dosages, as you can see here. There are currently 9 patents that are protecting the drug, and there's been 2 paragraph 4 challenges, which means that a generic company has filed an abbreviated new drug application stating that either they do not feel that their drug infringes on the patent or that they are not able to, that the patent is not enforceable by Impax. Rytary has 35 patent family members in over 14 countries, and they have 18 drug master file entries as well as 29 suppliers. Was able to extend and stabilize blood plasma levels of levodopa. There are 3 randomized phase 3 clinical trials that have been done on Rytary. The first was done in early Parkinson's disease and is known as the APEX study, and the second 2 were done in advanced Parkinson's disease, otherwise known as the ADVANCE studies and the ASCEND studies. As you can see in the first figure, in the APEX study, all 3 doses of Rytary given 3 times a day were superior to placebo. In the advanced PD study, the Rytary group was compared to immediate release carbidopa and levodopa, and you can see that there was a significant improvement with regards to the mean daily off time with Rytary. Finally, in the ASCEND study, the mean percent off time during waking hours and mean on time without dyskinesia were also improved with Rytary when compared to entapicone, which is an inhibitor of catechol O methyltransferase. There are a few ongoing trials looking at new formulations of Rytary. Specifically, one is looking at a drug called IPX203. Specifically, it has been shown to last up to 8 hours. To evaluate both the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics of this new drug, when compared to Rytary as well as immediate release carbidopa and levodopa. Impax submitted an NDA for IPX066, which later became Rytary, and on October 19, 2012, the FDA approved the drug for use in Parkinson's disease. Some of the key clinical endpoints include change from baseline in the sum of the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale. It included Part 2, which was activities of daily living, and Part 3, which is the motor examination, and specifically they looked at these scores at the end of the study. Other clinical endpoints include quality of life questionnaires, as well as what is called off time, which is the amount of time that the patient is without symptoms related to Parkinson's disease, or on time, which is time without the troublesome dyskinesias.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm going to move us into a discussion addressing the pricing and reimbursement structure of Rytary with regards to the drugs currently on the market. There are quite a few options for treatment of Parkinson's disease, though there's no true cure. There are multiple medication options for treatment of Parkinson's, but those most similar and perhaps the most direct competitors to Rytary are drugs that contain the same formulation of medicines. There is also Stalevo, a drug not entirely made up of carbidopa and levodopa, but is still a key competitor because of the formulation and administration, which is quite similar to that of Rytary. Levodopa and carbidopa are the key components of Rytary. Levodopa and carbidopa are generally taken together because carbidopa keeps the levodopa from being broken down into the digestive tract before it can reach the brain. It also can reduce side effects of the levodopa. Unfortunately, side effects are not uncommon for PD drugs and include vomiting, flushing, diarrhea, lightheadedness, dizziness, sleepiness, drowsiness, sudden involuntary movements, and insomnia. In some Rytary competitors, certain side effects can include changes in the color of the urine, sweat, and saliva. In a drug like Duopa, which is given through an implanted device, side effects could include implant site erosion, ulcers, and intestinal hemorrhages, and more. There is currently no therapeutic equivalent of Rytary, and the drug is quite expensive, priced at about $85 for a 30-day supply. Keep in mind that costs do change depending on specific insurance plans and coverage. Regardless of this high price, sales of Rytary are projected to reach $409.6 million by 2022. Alternatively, Rytary's competitors have a wide range of prices, with Cinemet starting at about $28 for 90 tablets to Duopa, which is priced at over $200 for the drug alone, not including insertion and administrative costs. Sales of key competitors are expected to decrease slightly as generic drugs come onto the market, and based on limited coverage, lack of generic availability, and the new form of administration available with Rytary, Impax can charge an exuberant amount for the drug. For these reasons, Impax can price Rytary however they feel with no regulatory guidelines. Unfortunately, there is no universal formulary with regards to private insurers, making clarity around coverage extremely complex. According to some of the largest private insurers in the U.S., Rytary is typically covered by private insurers but tends to be categorized at Tier 3. It should be noted that coverage often varies state by state, even within the private sector, and can vary within the patient's policy, even with an insurer who does typically cover the drug. A patient interested in Rytary would want to look for an insurance plan that covers the drug at the highest level, of understanding that as a general rule, drugs are categorized as Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4. Tier 1 drugs typically include generics. Tier 2 drugs typically are on a preferred list, meaning insurers have an arrangement with the drug's manufacturer. Tier 3 drugs are covered with limited coverage and usually come with a high copay. And Tier 4 typically includes specialty medications. Rytary is a relatively new drug, still under the original patent, and there is no generic available, so insurers can set a high price point. Rytary's coverage is restricted with regards to public payers like Medicare and Medicaid, and is categorized as a non-formulary drug, meaning it is not covered without pre-authorization or exceptions. In this case, the patient support groups have formed to help patients find options to make Rytary more affordable, regardless of the patient's insurance or lack of coverage. Oftentimes, there are coverage restrictions with new drugs like Rytary due to the lack of real-world experience surrounding its safety profile and overall status within the market. There are ways for patients to get around these restrictions by petitioning their insurer to cover the drug, exhibiting specific symptoms that require alternative medication, an allergic reaction to the other covered medications, a condition that prohibits a patient from taking a covered medication, or a patient who has tried multiple drugs and failed them. Though Rytary is not explicitly identified on the NICE website as an approved medication, NICE identifies levodopa and carbidopa, the two medications that make up Rytary, within their evidence search base, and identifies Rytary as a new formulation which has been launched in the US and licensed in the UK and the EU. Rytary's quality can be determined at about 0.65. This number was identified because Rytary cannot assist in providing any more perfect health years to a patient, but the drug does aid in alleviating symptoms and does provide a utility value to the patient.
Thanks, Amalia. In our final topic, we will discuss Impax's marketing strategy. But first, let's do a recap. The industry spends hefty capital to fund R&D throughout the 3 phases, and it takes a lot of time and effort. But research doesn't end. It continues post-launch in Phase 4. Parallel to the R&D work streams, firms have to overcome the additional hurdles of FDA approval and CMS coverage. In this course, we've covered the many factors that are out of the pharmaceutical company's control. So what exactly can they control? Well, they can leverage independently an effective marketing strategy to overcome the most important hurdle, stakeholder buy-in. For what is the use of a product if the consumer doesn't want to buy it, right? It is advised that a pharmaceutical firm should start as early as they can to develop their market strategy by gathering insights from all stakeholders to assess the true market, and thus use this information to effectively shape their brand. What is Impax up against in the global PD market? For one, as you can see in the top left table, the latest M&A activities are all gearing to expand portfolios in neurosciences. Secondly, as seen to the right, Rytary is a type of dopaminergic that is still in line with the oral administration trend, but Impax has to be wary of the other formulations to come. Last but not least, fortunately they do have some skin in the game, for they have similar market share with the likes of GSK, Teva, and Lundbeck. However, they are not as influential as the big players such as AbbVie, Novartis, and Boehringer Ingelheim. So how is Rytary doing on the product life cycle? Rytary and Duopo both launched in 2015, which makes them both in the middle of the introduction and growth stage of the product life cycle. Apicin and Medtronic's DBS device are older. And lastly, the potential new entrant is Neuroderm, where Phase 3 clinical trials are well on their way. Other than direct-to-consumer ads in popular neuromagazines, as seen here on the right, patients also have the option to enroll in a support service called the My Rytary Start Program. For doctors, there is KOL engagement via conferences and interactive dosing charts. The main message of all current brands is, this product gives back time to your life. Though it does pull at the heartstrings, there clearly isn't much differentiation. This could possibly be an angle to pivot for Impax. How is Rytary doing? As seen on the left, though net sales went up 75% for Rytary from 2016 to 2017, Impax as a whole didn't break even. But was it just operational costs to blame? As shown on the right, a patient survey highlights the possible reasons for stunted sales growth. Impax should invest in more patient services and update their brand messaging. For physicians, they should recoup from their 2014 cuts and rebuild a leaner medical science liaison team. Finally, Impax should consider other unique segments such as ancillary staff. After all, they serve as gatekeepers to a potential prescribing doctor. To conclude, patient-centered and evidence-based is not only a paramount trend for healthcare. Indeed, this also holds true for the biotech and pharmaceutical industry.